And welcome, henchman, back to another exciting episode of Deadly Podcast of Kung Fu, brought to you by the Villain's Demand, where I attempt to traverse the continuity of Marvel's greatest martial artists, Iron Fist and Shang-Chi. I'm your host, JVD. You can follow me at Villain's Demand over on Twitter if you want to talk about the characters, the podcast, my podcast, Crossover Collision, or whatever you deem necessary. Today, here on episode 2, we're going to start into the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. It was a martial arts magazine Marvel started right after Shang-Chi's debut, literally like 2 issues in, right after Special Marvel edition ended with 15 and 16, which was their first 2 appearances. This is a black and white magazine that they had put out where there was reviews over like Kung Fu movies. There was a thing like stories over Bruce Lee. There was techniques, if you could believe that. I don't think that's something you would get in today. Don't ask me, I've never read a martial arts magazine. But you've got interviews from like David Carradine, Chuck Norris. There's film reviews over all types of martial arts movies from the 70s, since it was all the craze. And we're talking like a lot of Asian movies, not a lot of American movies. And also you have the debuts of the Sons of the Tiger, which was a comic strip that was in this book. And most importantly, it was the second series to star Shang-Chi. And he's kind of like the main focus of the book. And today I'm going to cover issues 1 through 4. All these covers are actually done by the magnificent Neil Adams. And they're not all Shang-Chi on the cover or Sons of the Tiger. You will get Bruce Lee. You will get Chuck Norris. You do get David Carradine. So there's a lot of that's on there. But just for the Deadly Podcast of Kung Fu, I am only covering the Shang-Chi stories. Issue 1, the team, is Neil Adams, writer Steve Englehart, and Jim Starlin, who also did the art. Colors by Al Milgrom and lettering by David Hunt. This story is told by Kun-Lun, one of Shang-Chi's 4 teachers, and a minion, one of the top minions of Fu Manchu. And he's basically explaining to Fu Manchu why he thinks his son turned on him. The story is told in a flashback in which Shang-Chi was put through a deadly test by his father as assassins tried to kill him within his own fortress. Once he kills these men, Shang-Chi is kind of shocked to learn from Kun-Lun that this was just a test, and he was surprised at the deadliness of this test and how severe it was, and these men were actually trying to kill him, and he was very surprised by that. So we're learning, and we're going to learn through more issues as we go on, especially into Master of Kung Fu after his entire life. But at the end of this, we get this smirk from Kun-Lun that kind of maybe leads to betrayal. Later on, we don't really know, even though Fu Manchu forgives him because he actually has a lot of respect for him. Not a whole lot of notes in this book. We do see Shang-Chi break a sword with a strike, and we even see him catch a dagger between his fingers, just to show you how skillful he is. Now, to karate chop a sword in half, swords are, pretty much tempered steel, I'm going to assume in the 70s. So that means he's pretty strong to chop a sword in half. Unless he's like Karnak and he can spot the weaknesses, which we know he doesn't. So that's pretty awesome. Moving on to issue 2, Steve Englehart is still writing the character at this point, so he's like 4 issues deep. But Alan Weiss helps with this story. He also does the art. And then Al Milgrom returns for color, and the lettering is back from Tom Orzechowski, the name that I'm going to butcher every time that you hear it. Basically, and this book kind of starts this damsel in distress thing between this book and the next 2 issues that I'm going to cover. And they're all kind of in a different perspective in a way, I guess. But basically, Shang-Chi's alerted to this alley, or so his attackers thinks he is, as easily defends them from an ambush. Shang-Chi loves to beat up thugs. It's a very, very common thing in all of his books. After sparing their lives, he discovers that they actually oppose his father, and they take him to a karate school that works as a front for Fu Manchu's failed experiments, which are basically subjects who have lived to seek revenge. And we know from the first issue of Master of Kung Fu back in Special Marvel edition 15 that we know that Fu Manchu likes to experiment and whatnot. So apparently he's also experimenting on people. But when he refuses to join the school, their teacher, Mr. Man, very creative name, Mr. Man, calls for them to attack him. But after forcing the leader to believe them after a brutal fight, which he basically whoops everybody, Shang-Chi leaves with new allies, but only to watch the school explode by a bomb placed by one of Fu Manchu's minions. So he's already finding allies that are against his father, that once worked for him or were tortured by him, and Fu Manchu's already on his trail and has already eradicated him right in front of his eyes. Some issue notes for this. We open up with Fu Manchu once again calling himself the Mandarin. So if you want to go back to issue 1, I mentioned this, talking about with Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings movie. The Mandarin. You can go back, check out all that over on episode 1 and learn a lot more about that. We also learned that Shang-Chi's sense of smell has been a focus, and they kind of hint about it throughout the other issues, but it's really a main focus here, and it really starts to show through later issues when they make notes of it. Don't expect me to ever bring it up again. There's an awesome panel of Fu Manchu that's drawn here by Alan Weiss, where basically he's like hanging over Shang-Chi, kind of like the sun, and he's melting down on top of him. It's really, really cool, and I really like to see it colored, and it's a shame that it's in black and white. There's this inner dialogue. It's about how everyone sees him like his father when they look upon him. It's very, very cool. Even if you don't want to read these, you should just hunt down issue 2 online, probably like on Comixology or over on the Marvel Unlimited app, just to check that out. It's pretty cool. Once again, we see him break a sword with a kung fu chop. Like I said, it's going to be something that we see quite often. The one thing I don't get, as I'm going to wrap up the notes for issue 2 of Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, is Mr. Man's choice of clothing. It's just basically a pair of black leather tights, a cloak, and a dagger. It doesn't even look like he's been experimented on. But some of these guys have deformities, but there's nothing outrageous. So you're kind of wondering what type of experiments that he's actually running on them. And this is one thing that really hurts the story, is you needed color for these guys, because some of them are hunched over and they're really muscular. And as I read these, they really remind me of the old black and white Conan magazine, which I grew up reading. My mom was a big Conan fan, and so am I. So that's what these books remind me of. Now let's go ahead and move on to issue 3. This is the first issue that actually has a name. It's called Web of Deadly Vipers, hence the episode name. I tried to find if there was a name for actually issue 1 and 2, but I couldn't find anything. I couldn't find a collected edition that maybe had them listed. So if they're out there and you can find them, please let me know. Well, the team basically is the same from issue 1. Shang-Chi decides to save a frightened woman named Linda Fong as she sees some thugs and she's running from them. As he dispatches them, she flees from the reinforcements only to get caught by more. Shang-Chi gives up because he values their life, and they are taken to a Chinese compound outside New York City. Eventually they take her, but they leave him in the truck. Absolutely makes no sense, but they don't know who he is. These guys are not tied to Fu Manchu at all, so this is kind of the first enemies that Shang-Chi fights at, is not tied to his father. But basically, he escapes, breaks in, stops them from torturing her for information on who she might have spoke to when she escaped. Then eventually he winds up coming across their leader and kills him, who we learned is Robert Fong, the Adler. And he is actually Linda's father. So after killing him, she leaves the building telling Shang-Chi he can never understand what she's been through, and she doesn't realize that he actually does, because they were both manipulated by their fathers, who turn out to be villains. So he finds a kindred spirit who does not realize that he is a kindred spirit to her. So he's already finding issues with this. Some notes. It's pretty straightforward. Like I said, he's found a kindred spirit. There's a really brutal scene in here where Shang-Chi basically dodges 2 minions coming at him. One has a sword and one has an axe. and the axe gets buried into the guy's collarbone as they're both like swinging that make an X when he dodges, and the sword gets like basically embedded right to the middle of the dude's skull. Pretty brutal scene, and probably the most brutal scene so far in any of these books as I've read them and decided to go over them. Issue 4 is called Circle of Serpent's Blood, and this story is really, really good. It gets really interesting, and it's probably the most interesting Shang-Chi book I've read so far. Basically, this is the same team as issues 3 and issues 1. Chow Lu is sent to assassinate Shang-Chi because Fu Manchu fears that he'll discover his plan to poison the water supply. He's easily defeated by Shang-Chi despite his proficiency with throwing weapons. And we do see Shang-Chi catch daggers again and whatnot like we've seen here recently. He wears the Circle of Serpent's Blood, which Shang-Chi states that when he refused it was perhaps his first steps in creating the rift between him and his father. As a failure, because he told Shang-Chi that it was going on in L.A., Chow is now punished by Fu Manchu to be sent to L.A. to actually hunt Shang-Chi. So not really knowing how to get around, and this is what's weird, is Shang-Chi actually hitches a ride with some hippies from NYC to L.A. At their first camp, they actually smoke a joint, and they try to hand it to him, and he refuses it. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of funny, too. And just because they need a way to throw in some thugs, some gang members, they throw in some bikers who show up, and they're actually going to rape this chick. And Shang-Chi shows up, stops them, beats down a bunch of them. Lori and her boyfriend, they thank him, and they drop him off at this water treatment plant that's basically dammed up. And we see that Shang-Chi is ambushed by this beast, which is much like the one he fought at his dad's lab in Special Edition number 15. As they're battling and it falls to its death, Shang-Chi tries to save it, but pulls some hair and a circle off its neck, only to realize that it was Chow Lu transformed by one of his father's biological experiments. Really, really big twist there. It was really cool, very unexpected. Notes, there's a lot of drugs in this issue. I guess that fits the time of the 70s. We see Fu Manchu with one of his harem girls, and they're smoking basically some opioids, for lack of a better term. And then obviously the hippies are smoking weed. The whole getting high scene with the hippies and whatnot when Shang-Chi leaves is pretty funny, because Shang-Chi says that he is advancing his soul differently than theirs with inhaling the smoke. So I thought that was pretty funny. Fu Manchu's experiments. We've seen the deformities with the experiments gone wrong there in issue 2 of Deadly Hands. But now we're seeing them fully developed. So you kind of wonder if maybe some of these deformities these people have, we're trying to have this experiment ran onto them where they're supposed to turn to these beast men. So that was pretty cool. And that was really interesting because I'm very curious if we'll see even more of this as it happens, because, all of a sudden this beast shows up, didn't even think about it being this Chow Lu assassin guy, and right at the end it decides to speak like it almost regains control of his mind. And now you're kind of learning what type of villain Fu Manchu is going to end up being, and it's pretty deep. So we know that, and I'm obviously ahead here, but this is just kind of part of what you see with these experiments that Fu Manchu is, mixing up for his son and stuff he's going to wind up fighting up later on. So it's pretty cool. And also, the back of this issue is a ad for Iron Fist #1, which is actually Marvel Very 15. So, pretty interesting. We'll be talking about Iron Fist the next week on the episode as we cover his debut Marvel premiere. And there's one thing we did learn from this issue. And with all these girls in issues 2 through 4, and his naivety toward all of it, that Shang-Chi is probably a virgin. Yeah, he probably is. It's definitely there. But we're going to wrap up this episode of Deadly Podcast of Kung Fu. You can find me, JVD, over on Twitter at VillainsMan. If you want to become a fan of the Villains Band, you can check us out over at Facebook or at Instagram. If you like our music, check out Russian Tiger by Kuro over at SoundCloud. If you're looking for a bunch of podcasts that's involved with the Deadly Podcast of Kung Fu, go over to Podchaser and check out the In Nerd Circle. Just check the hashtag on Twitter and you'll find all the podcasts tied to it. I'm going to wrap this up. Next week we're talking about Iron Fist, and I will see you then.